Okay. All right, we're back and we're looking today at Genesis chapter 10. We've just finished the Noah story. We're pretty much it's interesting because Noah has died according to verse 29, but when we're going through this, he's actually still alive. He lives another 350 years, but his story is over for us. And we're moving on now to focus on his sons. And so let's get right into it. And just that first verse, we'll start there. Bob Thomas, would you read that for us? Just verse 1, if I can pull it back here again. All right. I don't know why it keeps skipping around like this, but it just does. Okay.
These are the generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood.
Okay. All right. That phrase, these are the generations, we've heard that before. We've seen that several times already, and it's going to come up 10 times in the book of Genesis. So I want to go back and recall them. And so if you have your Bibles, rather than looking up here, if you can find these passages, and we'll kind of go through each of them. We'll start with you, Bob Thomas, Genesis 2:4. Rob, Roy, if you get Genesis 5:1, Claudette, Genesis 6:9, Liz, Genesis 10:1, Elizabeth?
Yes.
Genesis 11:10 and 11:27, and then Bob Fowler, Genesis 25:12. And just kind of read those, and we'll kind of fill in the gaps here of how it's used. So let's take a look at those. So Bob Thomas, would you read Genesis 2, verse 4, which we've read before?
Such is the story of the heavens and the earth at their creation.
Oh, okay, you got a different version, but yeah,
Yeah.
these in the ESV, and these are the generations of what is it? Such is the story of the what?
Such is the story of the heavens and the earth at their creation.
Yeah. So the first one is 2:4. These generations of the heaven and earth at their creation. Okay. Genesis 5:1. Rob?
From the NASB, it says, "This is the book of the generations of Adam. In the day when God created man, he made him in the likeness of God."
Okay. So the first section is the first part of the story is the heavens and the earth. And the second phase now moves to Adam. Next one is Genesis 6:9.
Yep, and this is the ESV. These
Yeah.
are the generations of Noah.
No.
Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his generation. Noah walked with God.
Great. So then we have Noah. 10:1 is what we just read.
I
Who's
can
got
read
that?
again. These are generations of the sons of Noah, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. Sons were born to them after the flood.
Okay, these are the sons of Noah. 11:10. Now we're getting ahead of ourselves, but it's good to kind of break them down.
Right. Okay, 11, 10, and 27, or just 10 right now. Okay, 11, 10. This is the account of Shem. 2 years after the flood, when Shem was 100 years old, he became the father of Arphaxad, and that's
good.
10.
Yeah,
You want
so 10
27?
no, just 10 first, so it's just 27, just 1 second. So
Okay.
these are the generations of, I wish we all had the same version.
Yes, I know. It's
But
NIV.
these are generations of, who is it again?
Shem.
Shem, okay. And then 27,
This is the account of Terah. Terah became the father of Abram, Nabal, and Haran became the father of Lot.
we have now Terah. We have him next. All right, 25:12. Bob?
Okay, these are the generations of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Egyptian, Sarah's servant, bore Abraham.
Okay, then we have Ishmael. And what's, while you're there, what's 19 say?
25:19.
Yeah.
These are the generation of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham fathered Isaac.
Okay, then we have Isaac. All right, now we'll come back, if you don't mind starting over again. Bob Thomas, would you take 36,
Yep.
verse 1, and also verse 9.
These are the descendants of Esau, that is Edom. The 9 is. These are the descendants of Esau, ancestor of the Edomites in the highlands of Seir.
So this is now about Esau, okay, or also known as Edom. And then 37:2 is the last one in Genesis. What's that one, Rob, Roy?
These are the records of the generations of Jacob.
Of Jacob. Okay. All right. It's a curious list here.
Mm.
But this is how the book is broken down for us in sections. So there seems to be a beginning that says these are the generations of something, and then it sort of tells a story, and then it turns the page and says the next chapter, these are the generations of the next person or the next theme, and tells that story. So we have, for example, the story begins in Genesis 2 with the generations of the heaven and earth. Genesis 1 is sort of your prologue where God just explains how God creates everything, gives a big picture of it. But then Genesis 2, we really come down to the earth now when we begin. The heavens and the earth and the story of, and that includes what was in, we have Genesis chapter 2. I want to just point a few things out here. Begins first with sort of the planting of the garden. And what comes after that? After he plants the garden,
Doesn't he do does he do the birds next? The birds?
no. This is actually in Genesis 2. The focus is zeroes in on the garden now.
Oh, just
And they rest on the seventh day.
He rests on the seventh day. That was before this. And then we kind of zero in on the garden. So he plants the garden, and then he creates the man, places him in the garden, for the garden, and then he creates the woman for the man. But then it continues because we haven't gotten to chapter 5 yet. What happens in chapter 3?
That's the fall.
The fall of man. And what happens in chapter 4?
Cain kills Abel.
Cain kills Abel. All right, so this is the story of sort of, we have the first chapter kind of as a whole there. It speaks about the creation and the fall of the man and the woman, and how it that evil extends to their son, Cain, who kills Abel. And then of course it ends with Lamech, if I remember right.
Who's a murderer
Just
and loves it.
absolute depravity of Cain. Okay. All right, so that's the first section. We have the glory and the wonder to the fall, and that's all taken as a whole right there. Then we switch over to Adam. What happens in Genesis 5? What are we given there? You can feel free to look at your Bibles there. What goes on in Genesis chapter 5 until Genesis 6:9?
Well, we get the genealogy of Adam to Noah.
Yeah, Adam's. This is the we can call this the maybe the godly line, if you wish, from Seth to Noah. And then you've got, and then we turn the page to chapter 6, and what do you have there?
The ungodly line.
Wickedness.
What's that again? We have again, the absolute depravity. Of the world at this point. So here we have that. There's two that taken together here. We have this godly line and then this absolute depravity. Then we have the story of Noah. And 6, 7, 8, 9, which we just covered. What all happens there? We have the what is it? Noah finds favor. Okay, God judges the world, floods the world. and saves Noah and family. And then what happens after that?
Rain.
Um,
Oh, no,
rain.
it's flooding.
Right. And then he recedes, then we have sort of the new, sort of the new creation, if you will.
Mm.
But then what happens next?
uh,
Noah
Noah
plants the
falls.
garden. Yeah, and he has the wine and the issue with the drunkenness.
Yeah. So we have, in a sense, we could call it the shame of Noah here and the fall of Ham and Canaan. We have that awful scene where Noah is naked in his tent and Ham exposes him,
Mhm.
looks upon him, and then tells his brothers. And so we have that. And so then we have the curse of Canaan and the blessing of Shem. And now we get to this chapter here today and going further. So you're going to see each of these sections is sort of taken as a whole. And so we've just kind of finished a section here, and now we're starting a new section, the sons of Noah. That the story has taken a turn for us now. And we're going to look at the sons of Noah. But you'll notice with each sort of section, there are similar themes so far, isn't there?
Mm.
Each section seems to show God's grace and goodness and the depravity of man.
Yeah.
And then his grace again in the line of Seth and Noah, even in Enoch walking with God, and then the depravity of man. And then again,
But
the
there's a,
favor
but there's a thread of good going through it.
there is a thread. There is a thread of God's favor upon people and grace. Yeah, absolutely. Amidst the depravity with it too. And same thing when we get to the sons of Noah and we look at this next section, which is a short section. It's only from 1 to verse 10. We'll have these competing lines, this battle going on between the depraved forces of this world and the godly line. And the lesson I think that is so important for us to get is what it is that God is pleased with and what are the good things of life. That's where the interpretation goes wrong, is that the things that the world admires are the things that God despises. And the things that the world despises is oftentimes the things that God loves. Like Noah, for example. Remember back in Noah, the depravity of the world, the violence of it. But what did it say at the beginning of chapter 6? These were the days of the mighty men of renown. These were the heroes of the world. And God just sees that they're only evil all the time. And Noah is not esteemed by the world. You can almost deduce it that he's not esteemed by the world, and that the only ones who will come with him in the ark are his sons and their daughters, just 8, who will join with him in this. So let's take a look at the next passage here. So we're going to come back to these generations of heaven and earth and kind of keep breaking them down and following through on them. But let's take a look at the next section here. So we have the sons of Noah, the 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and they're going to be presented to us in reverse order. So the order we're given here is Shem, Ham, and Japheth, but when we get to it, we're going to start with Japheth, go to Ham, and end with Shem. So let's take a look at that. I need some folks who don't mind reading horrifying names here. So let's start with Rob. You want to start us off here?
Okay,
You with us?
Oh,
So
what would you like me to read to?
verses, just that first box there, 2 to 5, the sons of Japheth.
Okay. The sons of Japheth, Gomer, Magog, Madai, Javan, Tubal, Meshach, and Taras. The sons of Gomer, Ashkenaz, Riphath, and Togarmah. The sons of Javan, Elishar, Tarshish, Kittim, and Dodanim. From these, the coastland people spread in their lands, each with his own language, by their clans and their nations.
So the sons of Japheth, the only thing that we're just given all these names here, some of them look familiar, like Magog. I don't know if it's the same Magog, that seemed to be a different situation, but it's somehow connected. But of these names here, I think the focus, the extra text is sort of what catches our eyes here, verse 5, that we're told a little bit of where these people settled. Where do they spread their lands? Where do they dwell, the sons of Japheth?
On the coast.
Coast.
Yeah, these are the coastland peoples. When we talk about coastland, what coast are we talking about?
Europe.
Well, along the Mediterranean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this would be your Mediterranean coast. So we're talking about, this would become the future of the Romans, the Greeks, all that civilization here. It's interesting. I looked up the word coastland, and there's a lot of passages that reference in the prophets the coastland peoples. Yeah, for example, let me pull up some, share my screen and see, just to kind of get a flavor for it. Let me see here. I'm gonna.
Well, Tarshish is the town, the place that Jonah ran away when God wanted him to go to
Yes,
Nineveh. He ran to Tarshish.
Isn't that
exactly.
Spain?
Yep.
I think
Same thing.
so. It's
Yeah.
toward that, it's way on the other side.
Yeah.
But if you look up just the word coastland in the Bible, there's like 28 references to coastland peoples here. And particularly in Isaiah is interesting. It gives some prophecies, just get a feel for it. Maybe we can read some of these here. Like if you can see my screen here. Let's see, where we leave off here. Claudette, would you read some of these? Verse 11 of Isaiah, you can see it on the screen there. And then 26, and then 24:15, just those 3 verses to give you a flavor for what's said about them.
In that day, the Lord will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnant that remains of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the coastlands of the sea. And the inhabitants of the coast of this coastland will say in that day, behold, this is what has happened to those in whom we hoped, and to whom we fled for help to be delivered from the king of Assyria. And how shall we escape? Therefore, in the east, give glory to the Lord. In the coastlands of the sea, give glory to the name of the Lord, the God of Israel.
Yeah, a lot of the texts here, some of them are looking forward to a day. For example, like that last one here, the east will give glory to the Lord in the coastlands of the sea. So he first looks to the east, giving glory, and then he looks to the west, to the coastlands of the sea, will give glory to the Lord. Back in later on in 69, verse 9, the coastland shall hope for me, the ships of Tarshish first, to bring your children from afar, their silver and gold with them, for the name of the Lord your God, and for the Holy One of Israel, because he has made you beautiful. So there's this sense of these coastlands are like there's a future for them. They're not really part of the story that we're going to see much in the Old Testament. They're not really in the picture in the Old Testament. However, the coastlands really come into play in the New Testament. And where do we see them in the New Testament?
Acts.
In the book of Acts. Exactly right. Paul's missionary journeys are all to the coastland peoples. So if we come back to our picture, you can see on our map, I'm going to pull up our map so you can see it. If I can find my page again here. Let's see, Genesis notes, there we go. So on I sent a map out to you, if I can find it once again. And down below, you can see a little bit of where these would have been. Javon, I think this map may not be the best of them. I think there were some other ones, but a lot of their territory is in the coastland peoples here. So over in this area. And when Paul goes, his first trip is to Cyprus, to the coastland. And then he heads over to the Greeks and does all this work among them. And Tarshish is not on here, but it is over here on the other side. So I think I need to get a better map. I'm not sure if I like this one. I just kind of pulled it off the internet. So, but all right. So that's the first section here, a little bit about the coastland peoples. And from the situation where we left with Noah and the whole last scene with Japheth and Shem, Japheth was blessed by Noah, if you recall. Shem was the primary one who was blessed, but then Japheth was also, would be included it. And it's interesting that the first focus when the gospel is proclaimed, as soon as it leaves the Holy Land, it heads to the coastlands, to the sons of Japheth.
I find it a little intriguing that even though they're from the same family, they each have their own language.
That comes from Babel.
Yeah, yeah. From these, the coast people spread in their lands, each with his own language. They spread to their own land, as all of them will do. So the tricky part about this is we have these. There's no sense of timing on it about when things happened.
Yeah,
So it's kind of looking just at Japheth and say, just kind of spread them out, and then it kind of takes him from this point off the ark to the time when they would spread out and have their own languages, which is after Babel, which comes in the next chapter. But yeah, but there is a mention of that. But it is interesting. I think, glad you mentioned that. It does foretell each with his own language. Every one of these things will be referencing something that came about in chapter 11. So we have here a mention of languages and spreading out, which came from Babel. All right. So let's take the next one here. The sons of Ham. I'm not sure if these are probably just as horrible to say. Anybody want to take them on here? Liz, can I give you this one here?
Okay,
All
you
right.
know, I'm gonna stumble. I can do that in regular
right.
speech.
So
so-
the key is just if you just get the first syllable and then you can mumble the rest and then keep moving and don't look back. All
Good
right.
idea. Good idea. The sons of Ham, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. The sons of Cush, Seba, Havilah, Sabta, Rahama, Sabateka. The sons of Rahama, Sheba, and Dedan. Cush fathered Nimrod. He was the first on the earth to be a mighty man. He was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter before the Lord. The beginning of his kingdom was Babel, Erech, Akkad, and Calneh in the land of Shinar. From that land, need to roll up so I can see. I got bifocals. From that land, he went to Assyria and built Nineveh, Rehoboth, dash Rehoboth, Calah, and Rezin between Nineveh and Calah, and that is the great city. Egypt fathered Ladum, Ananam, Lahabim, Naphtuhum, Pathrushim, Kashluham, whom the Philistines came.
I think she's speaking in
You're
tongues.
doing great. You're doing great.
Thanks. Caphatorim, period, and Caphatorim. Canaan fathered Sidon, his firstborn, in Heth, and the Jebusites, and the Amorites, and the Gershonites, and the Hivites, the Akishites, the Sinites, the Adavites, Semarites, and the Hashmathites, and the Termites. After the clans of the Canaanites dispersed, and the territory of the Canaanites extended from Sidon in the direction of Gerar as far as Gaza, and in the direction of Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, and Seboim, and as far as Lasha. These are the sons of Ham by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations.
Thank you. Excellent job. Very good. I think we need to applaud that for a second here. That was great. Let's go through this a little bit. A lot of familiar things come out of this as you're looking at this list. You know these names. Let's go through some of the ones that we know and what's significant about them. We're going to get to Nimrod in a second, but let's start with the first names that are mentioned here. These look familiar.
Cush in Egypt.
Cush, and Egypt,
Canaan.
and Canaan. What's significant about immediately? You see, we may or may not know Cush very well, but we know Egypt and we know Canaan. And what do we know about them?
Their territories, their places.
And
As
what
well.
kind of places are there? What do we know about what's going to happen in Egypt? What's going to happen in Canaan?
Yeah, the Pharaoh will come about in Egypt with all his slavery of the Jews.
Mm-hmm.
And Canaan will be a bunch of wicked nations that God will expel from the land.
These are lands, right from the start, mentions these are enemies of God and his people.
Mhm.
Just in rebellion. And so that makes sense, because remember, it was Ham is the one who was
Not blessed.
cursed.
Yeah.
Right. And so with Noah's cursing of Ham and of Canaan, it shouldn't shock us that the troublemakers now in our story, every story needs antagonists here, are going to be coming from the descendants of Ham. That seemed to be where they're coming from. So Egypt and Canaan particularly are enemies. They're under his judgment. Then we get to this particularly spends quite a bit of time on this guy Nimrod. And what's significant about Nimrod?
He builds the Tower of Babel and he builds Nineveh. And then
Let's go through what's the first thing it says about him. What's the word that's said quite a few times about him?
Wasn't
Mm-hmm.
it,
Mighty hunter.
mighty man.
He's a
Yeah.
hunter.
He's a mighty man, a mighty hunter. Bob, you gonna say
wasn't
something?
he mighty in God's eyes
Well, here's the thing. It says he was mighty before the Lord.
before the
And so
Lord?
there's a question about what that might mean. And so I think the context, the question is, what does before the Lord mean? It doesn't mean that God is pleased with him, or is it another way to interpret it is that he is, we'll call this a possible interpretation, that he is mighty kind of, against the Lord, like against the Lord, in the face of the Lord, against the Lord. It's kind of like, it could be possibly, basically but the idea, his name, I believe, even means rebel.
Well, is it kind of like he's mighty before the Lord, like he thinks he's a mighty man, he thinks strongly of himself.
Yeah, I think, as you look at the context of the story, knowing what line he's in, the last time we saw a mention of mighty, it was in reference to the Nephilim,
Mhm.
these mighty warriors of renown. He is the first one who is a mighty one, is a first on earth to be a mighty man. So he is someone that the world would esteem and exalt. Some even suggest that he was a giant. But that he is presented, the Lord is brought into this, and it doesn't seem.
So usually we put mighty, we think of mighty as being positive, but in this case, it's a negative because he's against the Lord.
Yeah, he doesn't find favor with the Lord. So yeah, he's mighty before the Lord. He's standing before the Lord, and he's powerful.
Well,
It doesn't mean that he is favored and that he is in God's grace. In fact, everything would suggest the opposite in here. But the idea is the Lord sees this and takes note of it. But he is someone who is awesome in the world's eyes, that's for sure. And what does he do? We noticed here. We said he is the builder of Babel. I mean, that's a big deal. And that's the next story. And like we said before, each of these genealogies is going to set us up for the next scene here. It's going to incorporate things that will come from this next story of the Tower of Babel. Nimrod is the guy who leads the charge, and he's the one who builds that city. And we don't know for sure, but it seems likely that he was probably the one who was behind the building of that tower in that city.
That would seem to confirm that this before the Lord thing is not good. I mean, if he is the one that goes off Babel.
Yeah, I think in this context, yeah. So he is the builder of Babel. What else did he build, though?
Nineveh.
He built Nineveh. I mean, think about that. I mean, he builds the capital of the Babylonian Empire, and
Mhm.
he builds the capital of the Assyrian Empire. That's awesome.
Mm.
No, I have to say, my father used to call us, when we did stupid things, he would call us Nimrods.
I had a girl, I went out with a girl who called me Nimrod. That's all I'm thinking about is he's going through this. She wasn't a believer, so she had no clue. I had no clue why she said that.
So my first time reading about Nimrod was like, oh my gosh,
You know, that's the
must
beauty
be a-
of
he must be an idiot.
he is a fool, and that's the whole premise of it. It's you know the phrase dunce.
Yeah.
Do you know where that term comes from?
No,
It's from the times of the Reformation. A gentleman by the name of Duns Scotus, and he was renowned for being absolutely brilliant. But he and his followers were so smart, they got caught up in just the stupidest of arguments. Like, I think he was the one who talked about how many angels can dance on the head of a pin, kind of a thing. You know, just these intellectual exercises. And so there's an irony to it, is you have someone who is renowned for his brilliance and super intelligence, but he uses it for such trivial purposes that his name becomes the reverse meaning of it. He's an idiot. Even though he's brilliant, he's an idiot. He's a dunce now.
Are you
And
trying
same-
to tell me that this former relationship was referring to me as a dunce and I didn't even know it?
And so same thing with Nimrod. It's like he is absolutely an incredible man, highly esteemed. But when the Bible presents him to us, we see him for the fool that he is. There's no one more foolish who can think that he can stand before God and shake his fist and exalt himself in the presence of the Almighty. That's the greatest of fools. And so it's fitting that we would call people Nimrods. I mean, it may not be a nice thing, but that his name would be used in such a way because he is the fool. So
That or
even-
Chowderhead.
what's that?
It was either that or Chowderhead.
Yeah, chowder. My dad used to call me potato head. That was a thing. A tutum galuk. It was a Turkish word, potato head. All right, let's move on here. We'll stop with the name calling. I'll get to our things here. So he builds Nineveh. What else does he do? And he built not just Nineveh, but Kala, Rehoboth, Ir, and Rezin between Nineveh. And that is a great, he builds great cities.
Mm.
He's also building in Shinar, which is, south of Israel, of what we call Israel. It's the southern part of Mesopotamia.
Oh, is that what that is? Okay. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's take a look. If we go down here, you can, is it on our map here? Do we have that? So this again, I just picked the wrong map. I'm sorry. So what a terrible map this is. I can't believe I got this one. All right, ignore the map. I'll get a better one next time. But yeah, so these are, but also, I mean, these cities are going to be playing in the future in the scriptures here. So you know a little bit about their beginnings. Babel, what will Babel become? After the Tower of Babel has fallen, what does Babel become in the rest of the Bible?
A slur.
But I mean, the city continues to exist. By what name?
Babylon.
Yeah, Babylon. And so we're going to see that's huge. I mean, that Babylon is outside of Jerusalem is the most significant city in the Bible. It is the city of man. And in fact, Revelation, as we remember, uses Babylon as the symbol of the glory of man. Nineveh, we get to that in, of course, Jonah, in the book of Jonah. And there's a reason that Jonah flees to Tarshish, to the coastlands, as far as he can away from it, because they were so wicked. And it's the Assyrians whom God would use to conquer the northern tribes of Israel and bring them into captivity. So we have these great cities that are, then we get to this next section on the Canaanites. And we have a list of Canaan. And what are some of the cities you noticed there? Any of them look familiar to you? 15 to 20.
Well, the Amorites, we hear of them a lot.
Mhm.
Ah,
Yeah,
Verse-
remember what was said about when God spoke to Abraham about the Amorites, he said, it's going to be 400 years before they come back because the sin of the Amorites has not reached its fulfillment yet. So they are depraved, under judgment. Who else looks familiar to
Sidon,
you?
we
there?
hear about a lot. Sidon,
Sidon. Yeah, another city. that-
Tyre, Sidon and Tyre.
Remember, Jesus said it would be more tolerable for Tyre and Sidon than for you. I think Capernaum, some of these other cities.
Oh, that was in Ezekiel. Was that in Ezekiel?
Sidon falls, I think, in Ezekiel or one of the prophets, but Jesus references Sidon in the same breath that he mentioned Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah.
That they were also under judgment.
Speaking of which.
yeah.
Sodom.
Sodom and Gomorrah there too, right? All these cities, even and the surrounding areas. We're looking forward now ahead, and we can see this is an important chapter in a sense. It's kind of tedious, it may be for us, but before we even get to the stories, it's laying out the characters for us, helping us to understand who's who and who's going to be giving trouble here and who will be blessed and so forth, kind of looking down the road. All right.
Well, Havilah, as mentioned in 1 Samuel, that's where King Saul defeated the Amalekites, and he was supposed to take out the king Agag, and he didn't do it. And that was like his final fall before the Lord, before
Oh,
God.
good. So which one was that?
Havilah, it's in 1 Samuel 15. And then Gaza is mentioned a lot in Samuel, in David's travels and Saul's travels.
Mhm.
1 Samuel, God says, and when the Philistines captured the Ark of the Covenant, one of the places it went to was Gaza.
That's great. Yeah. So Havilah and Gaza are, enemies during the times of the kings, during the kings. I mean, so these are all just like, I don't know that there's any really good people in this mix here. And there'll be times when God will begin to show some mercy, like he does to Nineveh. He shows them mercy, and he will later on to Egypt. And in the New Testament, things certainly change, where you have some of these descendants of Ham are some of the first to receive the gospel too. Is the Ethiopian, is that part of Put or Cush? Is that Cush? The Ethiopian?
I think it's Cush.
Yeah.
I have to look it up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
So
feel
it's
like that
interesting.
too. You know,
So it's interesting, even though Ham is cursed and Canaan is cursed, and they, in the Old Testament, they're just a miserable, depraved people. In the New Testament, we see a change there, and some of the first to receive the gospel are the very enemies of God in the Old Testament, such as he is. So, all right, let's pick it up here, 21 to 31. And Claudette, you want to read that for us?
21 to 31, yes. To Shem, also the father of all the children of Eber, the elder brother of Japheth, children were born. The sons of Shem, Elam, Asher, Arpachshad, Lud, Aram. The sons of Aram, Uz, Hul, Gether, and Mash. Arpachshad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. To Eber were born two sons. The name of the one was Peleg, for in his days the earth was divided, and his brother's name was Joktan, or Joktan. Joktan fathered Almodad, Sheleph, Hazarmaveth, Jerah, Hadaram, Uzal, Diklah, Obal, Abimiel, Sheba, Ophir, Havilah, and Jobab. All these were the sons of Joktan. The territory in which they lived extended from Mesha in the direction of Sephar to the hill country of the east. These are the sons of Shem by their clans, their languages, their lands, and their nations.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right, now a couple things to note in this list here. There's some important names. It's very interesting in verse 21 is there's one particular person in this whole list that is called out in a special way. And did you catch who that was?
Japheth,
No.
Peleg,
Well, Peleg is going to be important. We're going to get to him in a second. But from the very beginning, verse 21, to Shem, before we get there's a whole list. It mentions his grandson, not one of his sons. Did you catch that? To Shem also, the father of all the children of
Eber,
Eber. Okay. So Eber is significant here. Perhaps the most significant in this particular genealogy. Now we don't know anything about this guy except for this. Eber basically is where we get the name Hebrew from. So a Hebrew is a descendant of Eber. That's why Abraham will sometimes be referenced as a Hebrew. He's not a Jew because he's not from, because the Jews came from Abraham, but he's not a Jew. And he's not an Israelite because that's those who descend from Jacob. He's Israel. So what is he? Well, he's considered a Hebrew because he's a descendant of Eber. So we don't know anything about Eber, just that he's a significant guy that they would have known something about. At least the Bible doesn't say anything about him.
Do we know that all of these are men's names?
I believe so. Yes, they would have been the men's names. If they are a woman's name in the genealogy, they would mention it
Okay.
in connection with a man. They would say a daughter. Yeah, you can assume that they're all men.
Well, it's just when you see that Shem was the father of all the children of Eber, I'm like, it would make total sense to read that if Eber was his wife.
Yeah, but it's not, because verse 25 tells us that Shelah fathered Eber. So actually it's his great grandson. So it's Shem
Okay.
fathered Arphaxad fathered Shelah, and Shelah fathered Eber. So it's actually his great grandson.
So when he's saying, they're saying the father of all the children of Eber, they're really talking about grandfather or great grandfather or something like that.
The father, yes, descendants of them. So
Okay.
Shem, a Semite, is a descendant of Shem. So the first list there, you get some terms, help you understand why we call them Hebrews and Shemite and Semites. They're Semites because they're descendants of Shem. They're Hebrews because they're descendants of Eber. They're Israelites because they're descendants of Jacob and Israel, and they're Jews because they're descendants of Judah. So we have that kind of if you're trying to understand the terminology, and you see that shift throughout. So you see, for example, again, Abraham is called a Hebrew. Later on, Moses, and they are the Israelites in Egypt. But then later on, after the exile, we have a new name, and that's Daniel is called a Jew because he's from the nation of Judah, the southern kingdom. So anyway, that's a little side.
what makes it challenging with the genealogies, and when they, like in Ezra and Nehemiah, when they talk about all the genealogies that they're trying to reconstruct because they were lost, they want to put somebody in the line of somebody else. So they'll say he's the son of somebody that's actually could be 4 or 5 generations back.
Yeah.
And he's from the father or the line of Shem.
Yeah.
And it could be several generations down. So when they say like Mordecai was from the son of Kish, or something like that, he's not really directly the son of Kish, but he's in that line.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's why I think it gets a little confusing that you read those, you have to really think about
Yeah,
not
You're ab-
taking it so literal.
you're absolutely correct. They don't do genealogy like we do. They're not akin to that. And so when we talk about Christ being the son of David, yeah, it means he descended from him. But it speaks about him as if David was his immediate father. All right, now we get to the next part. We have this one guy you mentioned earlier, Peleg. And what's significant about him? Says that
Pastor, just one more second. I'm still having a little difficulty. How do you get Hebrew from Eber?
because in the Hebrew, you're just dealing with consonants. So the BR is sort of, the vowels are not significant. It's the consonants that count. So when they write these things out, the strange thing is in Hebrew, you have the he is really more of a vowel. The H there, the HE is more of a vowel sound. The BR are your consonants, and the U at the end is also a vowel sound. So it's just BR, as Eber here is BR. It's just a different kind of variant of it.
Okay.
So that's how the names can be similar. Same thing with Semite and Shem. The sh and the S are really the same thing.
Yeah.
Different ways.
Okay.
Except for the M. So that's kind of the deal.
And the city here mentioned Uz. I assume that's Job's hometown.
I guess so. It probably, yeah. We have Uz. That's a good one. City of Job. That's got to be it, right? So there's a lot of, you can see the places and the people that are mentioned here are significant. We're going to get to that. It's going to come back to this genealogy once again in the next chapter. But for this part here, what does it say about Peleg? It gives some added information about Peleg.
In his days, the earth was divided.
Yeah, when was the earth divided? What's that a reference to?
Babel,
Which is
when all
another
everybody started speaking, the languages were all jumbled up so that nobody could understand anybody else.
So it's in his day that that Babel happens and the earth was divided. Some of even suggest, I don't know if some of these creation guys suggest that it was the earth was physically began to separate at this time. I don't know how that all works. But we know something broke it apart, and we assume it was the flood. But at this point, the earth is divided and people begin to be scattered during that time. So already we now know, all right, so on the one side of Babel is Nimrod, who builds this city here. And on the other side, we have Peleg, is the line of God. He's the one present when this happens. It's during his time that Babel is people are sent off and the language are confused. All right, so then let's finish it up here. Bob Fowler, you want to close it out for us here and read the last verse 32?
These are the clans of the sons of Noah, according to their genealogies in their nations. And from these, the nations spread abroad on earth after the flood.
These are the clans. And so the final note is, pay attention to the final word on this. It helps to understand what's really important to get, which has been told us throughout. What does he say about the sons of Noah? What has really begun now here?
Separation.
Yeah, I can't hear you. Liz, you said something, but you're on mute.
I said the creation of nations.
Yes, this is the beginning of the nations. This is sometimes called the Table of Nations. That's the important part. And now they are the peoples spread abroad on the earth, which is, by the way, which was God's plan from the beginning. You're going to see when we get to Genesis 11 that there was so much rebellion in Genesis 11 at the Tower of Babel, because the mandate, if you remember, given to Noah after the flood, what was Noah told?
Go forth and
Populate the
fill the
earth.
earth.
Yeah. Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth.
Yes.
It was its intent that mankind spread out, fill the earth. I'm giving you this land, take it. And they do the exact opposite at Babel. They gather themselves, they do it so they won't be scattered. They don't want to spread out. They want to stay together. It's a selfish thing that's happening among them. And so they're, instead of spreading out, which is a scary thing, to
Yep.
spread out and conquer new territories and to spread the knowledge of the Lord around the earth. And so they stay cloistered, they stay isolated, they gather together, and the Lord has to confuse their languages and send them and basically force them out. And so he spreads them out by, not by a blessing, but by a bit of a curse. And that causes enmity and strife, but that's part of God's plan, that we should be spread out and not sort of just bloated in one little place. Liz, you gonna say something? Sorry.
Yeah, I was gonna say, typically people gather together when they are frightened and they want to be, there's something to be said to be in a group of numbers of people. So for safety reasons, I wonder if the evil was so bad at that point that people were, because we're already into bad people, right? So
Yeah.
that the people who got so evil that they were trying to protect one another by being gathered together. And God's like, you guys get like the mother that comes into the kids that are fighting. That's enough. All of you to your room.
Yeah, it's really interesting, and that's a great point about the fear of a lot of it is it was like we become hoarders. We're afraid, and so and God is so gracious and kind, and He's always giving, and He intends that we share that image of Him and always be giving. And Jesus, what does Jesus tell His disciples with His great commission? Go now into all the nations, right? And make disciples of all nations. There's this always in the church, you see this going forth and blessing, and it's scary because
Points out that they were depending on one another instead of God.
yeah. And you're putting your hope and trust in yourself and making a great name for yourself. There's so much pride and fear driving this, which is something we need to continuously fight against in our own lives. There's that pride and fear and selfishness. And only the gospel can break us free from that. Only knowing that God loves us and He's with us. He will care for us. He will never leave us. And that we can go boldly and trust Him in that. That's His plan. And you'll notice again, the dynamics of good and evil. Going back to creation, the very beginning, what was so evil? Remember how it was described? The earth in Genesis 1, I think it was 1 and 2. The earth was described
Void. It's void.
void,
Dark void.
darkness, void. It was formless. It was this emptiness, right? And then the goodness is the light, and then the filling and bearing fruit and going forth. And the order of things, order is being restored and filled. That's the way this goes. And the force of darkness are at work again, trying to bring it back into like a black hole of selfishness. And God will have none of it, as we'll see in the next chapter. So,
I have a question for you, Michael.
all right.
The one thing I noticed is that for Peleg, the only thing they mention is that the earth was divided. And they mention no descendants. But yet for his brother, it seems like the list of descendants goes on forever. Is there significance to that?
That's a good point. So it ends abruptly there. So it suggests, it seems to suggest that the genealogies end at Babel. Peleg, we know, will have kids, because in the next genealogy you'll see his kids. He's in the descendants of Abraham. He's one of the ancestors of Abraham. So we'll see him again, but I think it seems to suggest that the genealogy sort of come to bring us from Noah to Babel. And so Peleg is the last one there. It's in his time that this happened. And so we're going to end with him. I'm assuming that his brother probably had kids well before Peleg had any kids. And I think if Peleg's in the line of Christ, chances are he's really old before he has any kids. That seems to be the way it goes. You got to be like in your 80s before you start having kids if you're in the line of Christ. Every child's it's like that's the way God does it. It's like he just does it that way, and to show his grace. So I'm gonna guess, I can't say for sure, but I'm gonna guess that the genealogy ends with him, because that's where Babel kicks in. And then his brother must have had his kids before then. So that's the only thing I would say. That.
Can you just imagine dealing with teenagers at 90 or 100
Yes.
years old?
Even toddlers.
Oh gosh, huh?
I have a question. Actually, I'm asking for clarification. Unless I misunderstood you, you said something about when you're going and spreading the word in the gospel. The Great Commission tells us to go and spread the gospel to all nations. And then you said something about we're doing it under our own power, or we think we are, whereas we're doing it under God's power through the Holy Spirit. Am I
Yeah,
right?
we were talking about, I think we were talking about something else besides that, of just
Okay.
kind of like how we not in reference to spreading the gospel, and I think when we talked about that, but that we
Okay.
are like the Tower of Babel, they're building in their own power, their own glory. That's the way of the world. We're doing things in our own power
Oh, okay.
and for ourselves. Whereas as those who belong to God, to Christ, it's like we go in the power of the Spirit and
Right.
spread the word. And so we can be giving, we can be free, we don't have to be afraid
Okay.
because the Lord is with us.
Right. Okay. Thank you for
beautiful
clarifying
thing.
that. I just didn't want to be misunderstood you.
Well, thank you. Absolutely. All right, we're gonna stop it right here.